Hey guys, welcome back to BSTSTech. This is episode 7, I believe.
Maybe.
Today we're going to talk about programming languages, paradigms, and development. What?
We actually going to be talking about paradigms.
Well,
It hurts my head.
paradigm is a buzzword that fits in here. Anyway, so programming, application development, just kind of where we like to work, what we like to work in, and how we like to do things. We might give you a little bit of a history lesson about certain topics. And that's really funny considering what just happened that you guys will never know about.
Yeah.
It's like the ultimate inside joke.
It's the worst inside joke.
Because they're just going to be questioning it and we're just going to keep talking about it.
Well, this is as far as anybody gets in the video, so it really is the worst inside joke ever.
Ooh, maybe if we keep acting like we're going to tell them, it'll entice them to watch it a little bit longer.
See, by the fact you just said we're going to act like we're going to tell them means I would have already switched off by now.
Yeah.
Of course, then again, I also like talking heads in the background, so I don't care.
Okay, so Blake, where do you come from a coding perspective? What do you like about languages?
Yeah.
Just give us your life story in a quick 10-minute summary.
Life story, no. Technological story, yeah, we'll see. So basically, as far as actual coding, like putting text on a screen and getting something out of it, I haven't really done any of that until about 2 years ago when I started playing with, I forgot it again, Code Academy. That's what it was. And I started doing their Python course. Within 6 months of that, I quit my job, went back to school, and started the degree program that I'm currently doing because $25K a year sucks to live on. But that's totally beside the point. And so before that, anything that I had done that was basically the absolute stupidest script you could do. So like a batch script kind of was above me in a lot of ways, simply because I didn't understand it. It was black magic. But there were certain things I could do, like I could do the ipconfig-all and ping and understand that, you know, if I do that and I call it a .bat and double click on it, it runs. Didn't understand what I was doing, but it did something. And so when I was learning Python, I didn't understand anything that was going on other than there are these data types and it does stuff and yay, I put words on screen. Fast forward a year and a half, 2 years later, now I'm comfortable with C++, Java, from classwork, SQL, Ruby, 9,000 other things, and I like playing with languages to see what their niche is. Niche. Thank you. That was gonna bother you, wasn't it?
A little bit.
But to see what their niche is. So I've looked at compiled languages, I've looked at bytecode languages, and ultimately I kind of like the scripting languages. Because, again, to remind you all, I'm a Mac.
It's not him, his computer.
Well, I think they could see, but at any rate, it does just...
Okay.
Yeah, whatever. I'm stupid.
Come on now, be nice.
I fought with code for 3 hours last night because I initialized something with a node class instead of an edge class.
So you know what the difference between me and you is?
I like putting heads against walls.
No. Well, actually, yeah, I guess that's something you like to do. But no, the difference is I was up until 3 this morning writing code. And I was
worked.
Right. Yes, that's the difference. Thank you for saying that.
Well, I got mine to work this afternoon.
Well, I guess I can't say much. I'm still trying to figure out stuff. And I you know, that thing I was working on, I told you I was working on like the color recognition. I actually had written a lot of it, and then I realized that I completely ignored the plan I was originally setting out to do.
Well, at least you had a plan when you started it.
Yeah, but I wanted to compare between like black values, red and green, but I compared for red, green, and blue. And yeah. Anyway, I don't know why I did it. I don't know how it happened. I just had a total brain fart.
And now you just had another one.
Huh? Okay.
You can sit there and think about that one.
Okay, continue.
I don't even know where I was. Oh yeah. So I'm starting to settle on more of the scripting languages like Ruby and Python. Those two I'm gravitating toward, and I seem to like Ruby, or seem to be doing a lot more with Ruby. Specifically, I think because I'm in a class where we're doing that with Ruby on Rails, so I have to kind of know what's going on with the Rubyisms and different things. But I like how it's doing, how it's abstracting the minutia. So anyone that's done C, C++, anything like that, you understand that there's just a lot of ever-loving crap that you have to do some of the most simple logic things that you need. Whereas with these languages like Ruby and Python, they're built on C, so there's C code running underneath it, but it's running as an abstraction layer. Apologies.
I didn't even notice that one.
I did. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to simply think about it and do it in a simple way when it's a logically simple step, like converting a string to an integer. I can do that very simply by saying variable name dot to underscore I, and that converts, it outputs an object that is an integer with the same number being stored of whatever the string would have been if it was a number. Now, of course, it does all sorts of fun little checking and different things to make sure that you're not outputting, you know, Tyler and trying to make it a number. But at the same time, like that stuff is there, and in C and C++, it was an example.
I just got called a class.
No, you got called a string.
Data type. I just got called something to do with programming, so that's okay. I don't know how I feel about it.
When you sit there and think about it. But you can do these kind of conversions because it handles that minutia. So one of the programs that I was working on last night, are you going to pay attention, or are you just going to sit over there?
I'm thinking about it.
Oh, well, you think about it. Okay. So one of the programs that we already alluded to that I was failing to work on last night, as I butted my head up against a wall, I had a C++ example of this particular type of algorithm. It's Prim's algorithm. And I was trying to do that and implement it in Ruby. What ended up being like 50 lines of code in C was like 15 lines of code in Ruby once I got it all said and done. And a lot of that was white space that I created for logical jumps, as well as, you know, just different things where it's like, hey, I need to put an end on it, lined all to itself to end a if statement or a for loop or things like that.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there because there are a couple of things that I could argue with that other languages do as well.
Yeah.
But
like the curly braces.
Well, not necessarily that, but as far as like, you know, 15 lines of code versus 50, that kind of thing. There are some reasons in other languages why they do it that way.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of reasons why to do it that way.
But in order for me to argue about that, I got to tell you guys my life story.
Oh.
Yeah. You're going to have to listen to it anyway. I'm sorry. I'm more
I'm
sorry for you
that.
guys, though. Wow.
You know, it's bad when you dish yourself. I'm just saying. Like, my life story sucks.
I've been his friend for too long. He's conditioned me.
No, I think our mutual boss conditioned you.
That's true. I haven't talked to him in a while.
Yeah.
Is he doing pretty good still?
Last time I talked to him, we were both pulling our hair out together, so yeah.
He doesn't have any hair.
I know. That's the problem. I have much more to pull out.
Okay, so My life story.
Well, I go think about things.
Hey, you told me to go think, okay? You shouldn't have told me to do that. You know how hard it is. You're welcome.
Dan, how come your code worked and mine took forever?
I can't say that in a polite way.
I'm stupid. He said it, not me. Doesn't it change anything?
So, when I was about 14 or 15, my dad said to me, hey, you should learn how to do that. He was talking about computers and web pages and all that crap. I don't even remember what I was trying to do. It was something, maybe I was trying to create a website for a game I was playing at the time. Tibia. If you haven't played Tibia, it's an awesome game. Chimera forever. Woo! But Tibia is a game. It was an MMO. Actually, it's still around.
Is it like RuneScape?
It's like 2D RuneScape, but much better. It's like top down.
Wait a minute, RuneScape was 3D?
Yes, RuneScape was 3D.
Never played.
Oh, that's okay. RuneScape sucked. Sorry guys, RuneScape sucks. Tibia is where it's at. But anyway, so I was trying to make this website, and I was trying to figure out how to do things, and I started writing HTML, just basic W3 consortium, copy-paste stuff. And then as I was playing with that and got a little bit more involved with it and more interested, I started wanting to play or make Flash games. This was around 2006, 2007, back whenever Flash games were in their heyday. And there was a lot of money. Newgrounds was where it was at. There was a lot of bad stuff on Newgrounds too.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to be 18
I like the
to get
tower
to
defense games.
Dude, one of the highest grossing Flash games at the time, like one of the first ones to sell for a lot of money, it was several $1,000s, and it was, crap, what was the name of that game?
Why would you pay thousands of dollars for a Flash game?
No, it was, somebody bought the license for it so they could host it. Gymcraft? Gymcraft. I think that's what it was called.
Is that like the precursor to Minecraft, or is
No.
this gym
This was
class?
like, hold on.
Gymcraft? You can't spell. Oh! Gym!
Yeah, Gym.
Well, yeah,
2008.
specified with a rock.
I don't remember how much it sold for.
I've never heard of this game. But
It
it's
was-
on iOS, so that's all that matters.
But it sold for thousands and thousands of dollars to be able to license it and put it on the website.
That's so weird.
So naturally, that ability to make that much money intrigues me.
Yeah.
So I started making Flash games, and the way Flash is written, or the way Flash works, is that you have your Flash platform, so to speak, and you write your code in it, and then whenever you export the Flash movie, the code runs inside that Flash object. So it doesn't really have any way to get to the operating system. It just works with whatever's in that Flash environment.
That raises so many questions about why Flash is so hacked. But that's for another time.
I don't know why it had so many problems.
But
Well,
it still does.
Flash isn't used that much anymore though. Like
Yeah,
Flash
it's still
died.
embedded in Chrome.
It is?
Yeah. I'm 99% sure.
Hmm.
Although they've done something like partition it away or whatever, but I don't know.
I don't know. I stopped paying attention to Flash in 2010, I think.
Yeah, they still put it on the machines at work.
Well, every now
probably
and then
like a
I'll
fault.
run into something that might need it, but it's nowhere near as prolific as it was.
I don't know. Flash games don't even use Flash anymore.
So, that's learning Flash. It's action script, and to kind of get into the, the topic of why that's relevant. Flash was technically object-oriented, but when I learned it myself, taught myself, copy, paste, all that stuff, and there was a lot of stuff I didn't understand about it. And I still didn't understand those things until I got to college, and there was an object-oriented class based in Java, and oh my gosh, it was a whole new world with the OOP.
I don't like that class.
I loved that class.
Yeah, but you walked in not knowing data types and hierarchies and different things of that nature already.
But let me ask you this question. Whose code worked last night?
Shut up! It's nothing to do with it.
So that's kind of where I come from with it, and how this relates to the reason why I got off on this tangent is I am now on C#, which is very similar to Java in a lot of respects.
It's a duplicate. It is.
But it's amazing. C# and Visual Studio is where it's at, man.
But Microsoft literally went over to Sun and was like, hey, can we copy your Java JVM? And they're like, sure, because it's open source, it's fun.
But it works.
Too bad Windows 10 doesn't. Just saying. I may run it, but I don't like it.
So with C#, the example I was using was that, your 15 lines of code versus 50. And I had told you the other night about a library I wrote for asynchronous background workers, which is the multi-threading stuff.
Oh, multi-thread, yeah, okay.
So, and I had mentioned that the reason why I wrote the library for it was because there was a lot of extra functions and stuff you have to use, and I wanted a way to make it work in 4 lines.
Right.
Now, in that example, you could technically do things without those extra functions, but the way that it was designed was more of a design pattern. So I wanted to be able to use that whole design pattern without having to use that amount of code.
Right.
So I guess what I'm getting at is that why is it able to take those 15 lines of code and do the same thing as the 15 lines of code in the other languages?
The simple reason is because the language itself is built on top of already optimized C code itself. That's pre-compiled, sitting in the background. So every language, more or less, and again, there's some weird ones, but more or less all languages go back in some shape, form, or fashion to C and then go into binary because it's easier to do that cross-platform and different things. And there's a lot of stuff with how the C compiler goes down to assembly before it gets to binary, true binary or whatever. A lot of weird stuff. I don't fully understand it. And so like things like JavaScript and even C++ or C# as your example is, Objective-C, Swift, like all of these different things, more or less at the end of the day, at some point in time, they're not compiled into C source code, but effectively, if you want to think about it, they're all compiled at some point in time before you get output of executable. They all get into like a C bytecode type thing. And so what Ruby is doing, and what Python, it's catching fire better because it's newer, whereas Ruby's been around since '95.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's old. I didn't know that until like a little while ago, but it's old.
See, I thought it was the other way around. I thought Python was the older one.
Yeah, it's weird. But both languages effectively are doing the same thing. They're simply saying, we're going to take C code that we have designed to work the way we want it to, and we're going to use that as an abstraction layer to make it easier to write. That's one of the reasons why Python's so widespread now, is because everyone's looking at it and they're like, oh, this is so easy. Like, I don't have to do a whole lot, and it runs slower, but it's not that slow. Like, It runs slower than Java, but I don't have to wait for the JVM to boot up every time. It runs faster than a lot of other languages that aren't C, Java, C++, things of that nature. Because like those three are really like the super optimized. If you want absolute speed, go to one of those three. And if you want utter absolute speed, you have to go to C or assembly. And if you go to assembly, God rest your soul.
It would be cool.
You're going to be tired
to know how to do that.
In fall, I'll learn.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I know. It sucks.
You'll have to let me know how that class goes. Actually, I'll know how that class is going to go, but you're going to have to let me know how you survive it.
It's painful. I don't even want to think about it, but it's painful.
Like I said, the assembly class I took, I failed.
Yeah. I'm not looking forward to it. But at any rate, so you've got these languages. It's just a matter of how it's getting down to a C non-source code format before it actually becomes a binary executable. So with Ruby and Python, they're trying to make as quick an abstraction layer, or as quick a layer to interface to get to that bytecode without actually having the language itself that we have to learn and type into the screen be difficult. Make it simple, while still getting as much of the benefit as possible. C# on the other hand is like, we're going to copy Java.
Okay, well, since you're going to hate on C# a little bit.
I do hate on C# because I hate on Java.
But I like
I can't find anything in Java. I cannot find a blessed thing. It drives me bananas.
you talking about like when you're trying to reference classes and stuff, or built-in APIs, all that jazz?
When I'm trying to find the source code, or when I'm looking in the source code to try to find something, if I want a function declaration, they ain't got any. You go find where that crap's written, and good luck. Bye. See you when you come out the other side. It drives me bananas. And a lot of that has to do with, I'm used to C++ if I'm having to deal with minutia. Now with Ruby, I don't have to do declarations in that sense, because, okay, this is going to be very backhanded. I'm making fun of Java for one thing that I'm also doing in Ruby. So I don't have to do declarations at the top that stand alone like C++ does.
Right.
But at the same time, the whole function, like, I've written a number of different classes and whatnot for various things. I have yet to write any function, any method in a class that is more than 5 lines long.
Wow.
Yeah, there ain't nothing to dig through. Like literally a single vertical screen, and I'm on 12 inches. Like I don't have a whole lot of real estate here.
That's the only thing that's 12 inches in his life.
Wow, that's grossly inappropriate. You wouldn't even know. I hope not.
I believe it was a safe assumption.
Well, yeah, it's true. So even the vertical real estate that you're about that. I don't even care. This is funny. So the vertical real estate that I have, even on this tiny screen, like my entire class from start to finish starts and ends within the space of that screen. So there's nothing really to dig through. Whereas with Java, because I have to deal with all the minutia, because I have to do, some of the stuff that we have to do in OOP, you're looking at 200-300 lines for a single function sometimes, and it's just like, I can't find anything. I literally just can't find anything.
Well, I have ran into that, well, not necessarily ran into it. I've seen kind of what you're talking about. I used to, harken back to the ActionScript days, there were tweener libraries.
What?
Tweener libraries.
I
Do you know what a
swear
motion tween is?
No.
Okay, I'm cutting you off before you. It's not your turn to make an inappropriate joke.
You know where I'm going now.
So, the tweener.
I'm sorry, I just had to say this. They're making libraries for that now?
Tweener, 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 tweener. So, a tweener. God, I had never made that association before.
It's because you were a child.
I've had to look up tweener libraries the past year or two.
Now we're really off the rails.
At least it's not Ruby. Because then it would be Ruby off rails.
You need to die.
Okay, so
Tweener libraries, go!
So the motion tweens, basically what it does is it handles if you're moving an object to another position and you want it to transition in a certain way. A tween is basically the algorithm and the equation that the numbers go into to make that motion mathematically make sense.
Oh, so it's like if I want to see somebody walk, there are a multitude of trigonometry functions that have to happen to make that look realistic.
Yes, pretty much.
Yeah.
So, and there were a bunch of them, and they were open source because that's just the way it worked with Flash. So there's not really any, you couldn't compile anything and then reference it later. It was all source code and then all compiled together.
Yeah.
So I would look through there and try to figure out what the heck is going on because there's just so much stuff. But a lot of it had to do with the, conventions. The conventions they were using to keep their code clean and organized. And unless you knew what they were doing, you probably weren't meant to understand it anyway.
Right, and there's a lot of that in Python Ruby as well. So if you ever look up, like I've dug into here and whatnot, into the USR, which if you don't know what that is, go to the Linux channel and eventually there will be a video up on the Linux file system. Or not channel, but playlist. But at any rate, I would... Yeah, USR, the Universal System Resources folder.
Oh.
That's what that stands for. I swear, if you thought that was short for user, I'd shoot you right now.
I don't know that I'd ever paid attention to it.
Okay, well, good. Then I don't have to shoot you. Get a new co-host. But at any rate, so, like, if you ever go digging in there and you look at the actual Ruby code that is written for libraries and different things, I have no idea what in God's name you did on that thing. That is funny. It's just mountains of stuff inside of a single folder or a single file because they're trying to do multitudes of classes abstracted away and all sorts of other fun stuff. So I mean, it's possible to do that. Like I've got a script that I found on GitHub that's a Python script. It's like 6,000 lines long.
Oh God.
In a single file. And the reason why they did that is because they want you to run the single file and then it goes through and creates an SMB share based on the command line arguments that you give it. So you give it what folder you want to share and it will create the WebSockets and everything to deal with that, and it's all just tucked away inside one freaking monolithic file.
Good Lord.
Yeah, I tried to piece through that. I couldn't figure out where it started. Like, it was just class and function definitions after class and function definitions, and after the 2000th line, I was just like, how long is this? Scroll. Oh dear God. Quit! Like, get rid of that. So yes, it is possible to do those things, but if you do the separation of files, it becomes really stupid simple. Because you have every file named with the same name that the class that's contained within it.
Right.
Your main file is the main function that actually pieces all of those together and does something useful. Right. So whether you're building a GUI application or a terminal one or whatever, you can do all that kind of stuff, and because it's the separation of duties, it becomes very easy to filter through, because if every file literally fits in a single instance, you can see start to finish, it's real easy. And if the naming conventions on it is simple to where you're sitting there and like, so the problem I had this morning, figured out this afternoon, absolutely made me lose my mind. But at the end of the day, it was really simple. Like I was looking at functions I'd never seen before on priority queue, where literally I was taking a hash array and saying sort by, and then gave it the key and the value and it said minimum value inside curly braces. And then literally all I had to do to fix the problem that I was having was say dot to underscore h. And it converted that sort into a hash and outputted that as a new object. And I just pointed it back to the original priority queue, because what was going on, and this is a real, I think it's fun and I like it about Ruby, and this is the only thing about Ruby that I haven't seen in Python. When you do method declarations, there's a couple of different things that they like to do. So if it returns a true or a false value, you would have the method name and then you end it in a question mark. If you do something that is destructive, so like I have a priority queue and I do a sort on it, and it permanently changes the priority queue's order, within that method, then you would put an exclamation point to denote this is destructive. When you call this, it permanently changes it. Where the method I was calling didn't have an exclamation point, so I should have realized, because I knew this, that it wasn't making a permanent change. It was simply temporarily sorting it, but it wasn't making a permanent change to the instance variable inside of the class. Right. So I should have, idiot me, should have realized it, and that's why it wasn't, it was simply giving me, the first one in the priority queue instead of the minimum that was in the priority queue, the lowest value. But so there's different little things like that that make it very simple for someone who doesn't know Ruby to simply be like, well, what's this? It says 2s. Well, what's a primitive data type? String. It's probably 2string. Does that actually work? Yeah. Okay. Whatever. A lot of it is really stupid simple. Right. And when you understand, the question marks and different things, it makes more sense. There's variable naming schemes where if you're doing an instance variable, you have to put the @ symbol at the front of your variable. Whereas if it's simply inside of a block, so you have a for loop where you're iterating over and doing a for each of, for every item in this array, call each one of them item, and then iterate through and do whatever's in the block. Right. Well, item, you don't put anything like the @ in front of, because it's a local. Once that block is done, that variable's gone. Right. So you don't do anything. But things that are going to hang around, or the instance variables, classes and whatnot, you would do an @ so that it can be referenced later on outside of that main block of code that's created in. So there's stuff like that that makes it, once you see it and once you understand it, it's like, okay, it's helping you create readable code, even if you don't know what in God's name's going on. You just kind of can piece it together and be like, well, that makes sense.
Well, let me counter that with C#.
Okay.
So, the prime example that I got in my head here is you say, 2_s, right? Mm-hmm. For 2string.
Yep.
Every class, data type, whatever that I've dealt with in C# has always had a 2string function. And it's just that simple as dot 2string. That's really all I was going with that.
Yeah. Now, does it have stuff to be like to double, to integer, to float, to, does it have anything else? Because I can convert arrays to hashes and hashes to arrays and all sorts of other things.
Well, there is like toList, toArray.
What about the other primitives?
I don't know.
Okay. That's normally only go one direction.
Well,
because I'm normally taking strings and converting them into numbers. Like, I rarely ever convert something to a string.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can do string to, like a lot of what I run into is you know, with C# and like GUI testing and forms, you don't really have that command prompt that you can output stuff to watch and debug. So what I'll do is I'll do messagebox.show, which only accepts a string as its parameter.
So you have to convert everything to a string.
Yeah.
Now, question on that, because you brought up that you don't have a command prompt. Is that because you're doing it in an IDE, or is that specifically because C# just doesn't do that?
Now, C# does work in the console.
Okay.
You can run it. I mean, you can run an executable from a console, just as anything.
Right.
But whenever you are working in the IDE and build stuff using IDE, it takes care of all that stuff in the background and then
So
just pops up the form.
Is there not a debugger, like a console type thing that it can produce itself if you... Because like one of the things that the Java game Brass does, Brass is something from our OOP class, don't worry about it. But one of the things it does is like you get the GUI that has the game board and everything, but it also will output information to the console that ran it.
Right.
So if you were to do console output statements, would it literally just send that to nowhere? Or are you just doing the message block simply because you knew that existed and said, well, I have to think less if I just do that?
It's partially that.
I thought so, but it's like, because to me, IDEs are, the whole point of them is to make your life easier.
Right.
And if making your life easier is literally, I have to create boxes to X through, that's not making my life easier.
Well, I mean, that's it. Usually, like when I use it, it's, I'm just wanting to make sure that that piece of code ran, and I can tell that by seeing whether or not it shot up the box.
That's why you're clicking through 10,000 of them when you were showing me stuff earlier.
Yeah, and I was trying to see what that data was looking like, because I didn't care if the application ran or not. I just wanted to see what that data was.
Okay.
And it does have a debugger that you can run, and it'll show you. It's, for me, it's been more useful for like index out of array or index out of bounds array exceptions.
So when you use the debugger, it's much more in a GBD fashion.
GBD.
Oh Lord. GBD is a console debugger for C and C++ code that allows you to step through it and see exactly what line of code it's on from your source and deal with, like it's compiling it and piecing through because it knows what the bytecode was, but also has source code and different things of that nature.
It's very
so that's what the debugger's doing.
And like I can see, it also shows me the variables and what was stored in them at that point too, and where they got to for it.
Cool.
Yeah, it's.
That's the one thing I haven't gotten far enough in Ruby. It's like I don't have a debugger yet.
Nice. But as far as the console thing goes, I'm wondering if part of that, because whenever I write like GUI applications in there, I just create a Windows Forms application. That's the project template. You know, there's console application templates that you can write with.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if the reason why I'm not seeing an actual console window behind my forms is because it's running it as just a form. That's your main thread. But if I were to write a console application and then create a form class that also pops up and does stuff.
Yeah, but
I'm not still having a console there, but
I don't know. You've seen what I do. Like it's weird.
it looks cool. And I have to say, at one point I tried to learn Python, and I ended up just not having time. Yeah. But there is a lot of cool stuff with it. And that Tibia I was talking about earlier.
They were made fun of.
Yeah. There actually used to be kind of a unofficial spin-off of it, kind of, but it was more like an open source thing where there was a community that, I don't know if they just recreated it within Python, but it was just a separate version of the game that you could play and nothing would actually affect the real game. And it was cool. I mean,
Wow.
it was big and it was awesome, but it was all Python. I used to try to write stuff in that,
Okay.
but that's been, God, 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Python, it's fun. With the trip that I went on down to Cat Financial a couple months, or yeah, this was about a month ago now. While I was there, one of the other students just so happened to be a master's student, but she was doing like her master's on cybersecurity or whatever, and like we got into the conversation that never stopped because she was like an avid Python person, and I'm like, Python's cool, Ruby's cool. I'm just more comfortable with Ruby. And she was just drilling me like, well, why do you like it better? What's this? What's that? And like, I don't learn it. Like, I don't want to talk to this. It was so funny. But at the end of the day, it just gets back to the same thing that I've always brought up. What makes you productive? So like for me, I'm learning Ruby. It seems to be something that I am liking, simply because of the way the maker of the language kind of came up with it and designed it. So he's a Japanese guy, and back in '95 he was like, you know, all of these languages just look so ugly. And so his idea with Ruby was to make very elegant code, make it very readable, which for '95, I mean, you've seen some of the Ruby code. That is readable as all get out compared to looking at C code or assembly. Like, holy crap. And so, I mean, there's just a number of different things there to where it's like, well, whatever works best. I don't know. It can be packaged a lot of ways, which is useful for business and whatnot, but
I was
I don't know.
about to help you into that.
Oh, you want me to talk about that?
But I wanted to talk about something first.
Go for it.
So, with C# and Java too, well, I don't remember enough about Java. As
Say
far
what
as
you want to say, I'll tell you if you're right.
compiling it and having an executable file. Is that the jar?
No.
No.
So with Java, and this is one of the things I hate about that class because it abstracted all of this with XML junk. So with Java, you run Java compiler, point at your main, whatever holds your main class, and then it goes through and creates everything else and compiles it into bytecode, which ends up having the .class extension.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, you have to know which one is your main, you know, which one has the main class. And then you say Java and that main class. So and that runs it on the JVM.
Ew.
Yeah, it's disgusting as all get out.
So I don't remember that part.
That's because he never taught it. He literally gave you the .bats, which ran the build XMLs. The only reason why I know it is because in trying to get my head in the game before the class started, I went through and learned a little bit of Java to see what snot was going on. So I was expecting to have to deal with a two-step compile and run just like C++, whereas he's doing it with all this, you know, bats and XMLs, and then I had to piece that together so that I didn't have to run a Windows VM all semester. Holy Lord Almighty, that was not fun. But yeah, I don't like Java.
So obviously, in the spirit of trying to monetize an application that you made, Java would not be the best way to go. With that sense?
No. So there are the .jar. I've only ever seen like open source .jars. I've never seen like a proprietary software that downloaded it. And obviously, you know, when you look at Minecraft, which is a great example of it. So for those of you that don't know, Minecraft was made completely in Java by Mahjong. And then when it was bought out by Microsoft, they started doing quirky stuff to it. The Linux version, you get nothing but a .jar file. It literally is called Minecraft.jar. That's what you download from the site. You pay $30 and you get a single file. Go forth and prosper. If you don't know how to run it, good luck, because Microsoft hates you. But, so for their...
But Google loves you.
That's another story. So for the Mac OS version, they have a .app, which is what Mac OS does. And for the Windows version, they have, the standard installer that makes sure that you have Java and all these other things to make it all nice and gives you an executable and asks you if you want a shortcut. But as far as like actually building a Java applet or application and distributing that for software, I have no idea. Like, I don't know how that would work, simply because you can pass around .jar files and they'll run on anything that has Java. But I've only ever seen that as either creating a shortcut to run the command line, Java, I think it's -cp with the jar file and path, or you actually go through and open a command line to do that yourself. I have no idea if you're trying to monetize how that would work.
Well, switching over to C#, Visual Studio actually has like Windows installer libraries that you can create those installers, and it pretty much compiles everything into an executable anyway. Now you've got your libraries and stuff that have to be in all separate files, but it's much more consistent with how other applications appear in Microsoft.
It's just funny to me that you bring up that point, simply because Microsoft is a proprietary first, for-profit company, so it's like a no dirt that their language, which is a copy of somebody else's language, and their IDE for that language is going to have the ability to create an installer built into it to allow you to monetize your proprietary software and make money off of it, because you normally have to spend a pretty penny to get Visual Studio in the first place until they come out with the Community Edition. They have not always had that. And Visual Code is not the same thing. Totally different conversation, but it's not. But your mouse runs at 60 frames per second.
What?
Did you see that bug?
What?
Okay, so Visual Studio Code is built on the GitHub Electron API that GitHub built Atom on.
Okay.
So Atom's that Sublime Text-esque text editor. Visual Studio is done the exact same way, or a similar way, using the same Atom API to use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to make desktop applications natively, cross-platform from the get-go. For whatever reason, they were refreshing the mouse 60 times per second. And so people running the free Visual Studio Code were having problems of Visual Studio having high CPU utilization because their mouse was refreshing at 60 FPS. It's like, this is the stupidest pile of crap I've ever seen in my life. Why would you do that?
Oh gosh.
Like, I took the original implementation of Space Invaders and bumped that sucker up to 60 FPS on my terminal, but I don't want my mouse refreshing at 60 FPS. Like, this is just weird. Like, that is absolutely weird. But no, I find it absolutely hysterical that you're talking about a Microsoft product as if it's a surprise.
I'm not
that they
saying
want you to monetize.
that it's a surprise. I'm just saying that there's a very streamlined way of doing it. Yeah. Now, the moment you've been waiting for, you people don't know anything about.
Oh, I have been waiting for it. If I know what you're talking about.
How does Ruby do this?
Wow, that kind of a setup. Okay, so Ruby and Python at their base are script languages. So just like when you're creating a bash file on Unix or whatever, you end up doing the shebang, so the hashtag exclamation part /bin/bash, which basically is just telling, when you run that file as if it's an executable, what's going to be interpreting it. So Ruby and Python do the exact same thing. You tell it Ruby and the file, and then it goes through and interprets every line and says, okay, what's this line? All right, let's do that. What's this line? Okay, let's do that. And does its thing. It has, because there are very smart people that do very smart things, there are individuals in both communities that have built different interpreters to not work on C, but instead work on Python. What that allows you to do is convert it into Python bytecode and then run that on the JVM. So anybody that has, like him, that has JavaScript, or Java, not JavaScript, but Java installed on their machine, they can run my Ruby code as long as I first compile it through JRuby into Java bytecode. Or if I use a Ruby gem, which is Ruby's package management thing, installer, whatever, I can install it, or I can bundle all of that up into a single .jar file in a very similar sense that Minecraft for Linux is a single .jar file. And then I can pass that over to him, and he can run it as if it's native on Windows, and it's just a typical Java.
So that would still be ran with the java-cp jar file.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be run the exact same way. And it's kind of interesting how that works. At the same time, Python, because it's newer and it sees the value of monetization, more or less, it really more or less sees the value of integration into other applications. So what it has natively with its C interpreter is the ability for you to compile it into .pyc, and what that is Python C bytecode. And what you end up doing, ArcGIS does this. It's the reason why with ArcGIS on the install, you have to install Python with it.
Okay.
So what it does is the root application itself is built in C or C++ or whatever, low-level language that you want, basically one of those two. And then it runs spin-off processes that says, hey, run this bytecode. You know, somebody clicked on a button or somebody filled in a square somewhere or whatever, and it says, go run this bytecode. And so it integrates into an application, so you can take this very easy to do, easy to write code, and you can compile that once, throw it inside the application, and suddenly you have extra functionality. A lot of people do this in the modding community, very similarly with Lua. Completely different scripting language. I don't like it, but it's more or less, it's a scripting language, so whatever. But they'll do the same thing, and that's how you add extra functionality into games. Is you basically build Lua scripts that do extra stuff, and suddenly you now have extra functionality when you put it in a specific folder inside of the application structure. I have no idea. But I do find that kind of thing, like those types of ideas, interesting, because you can spend a lot of time making the root application as fast as possible, and then certain things where it's like, I don't care if I spin that off and it takes a while, I'm doing other things anyway that are faster and more vital. You can let these very simple to write, or easier to write, scripting languages handle that kind of stuff for you and just say, hey, go run that. I'm going to continue doing my high performance stuff that's really nitty gritty and close to the metal, blah, blah, blah.
So pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting stuff. And I'm sure there's ways to integrate it into C# or other things. I just, because I'm more of the open sourcey kind of guy anyway, I want to see what's going on. And I like looking at the source code, so anytime I get the opportunity to do it, it's valuable to me because I can see how somebody else did something that might be interesting. Like with GUIs, I looked at Evan's, it's GNOME's PDF viewer. The source code for that looks all over the frickin' place. Like, I have no idea where to start. But at the same time, I've looked at Python GUIs, And because of the way Python is and different things, it just makes sense. And I can read that and understand what the GUI itself is doing better. And so for that kind of stuff, it's like, yeah, why not? I like living in the terminal anyway. I'm not a fan of GUI applications. I even have a browser in the terminal.
Oh gosh.
Which, you gotta admit,
It's
that's
kinda
kinda cool.
Just completely impractical.
Well, if you don't, okay, any of you that's like, I don't want to see pictures, I don't want to see ads, terminal browser. Don't have to do
But what about the
anything.
cat videos? How do you watch cat videos in the terminal? Mr. Linux, I'm waiting.
YouTube downloader, and you paste in the URL, and then you watch it in whatever your offline media player is.
That's not watching it in the terminal.
There's a way, and I've seen this work, and it's really corny. Like, I'm not even joking. You know where I'm going with this. But there's a way to literally convert on the fly. It takes massive amounts of CPU usage. But it converts live video into ASCII art.
Oh my god.
It's just like, oh, be unto the powers that did that. You are amazing human beings.
Holy
I want
crap.
to. Yeah.
That is awesome.
It is very complicated to get to work. It is buggy as all get out. But I've seen examples of it working, and it's just like, this is amazing. Holy crap, this is amazing. Man. So yes, everything can be done in the terminal, but you don't want it. It's ridiculous. But GUIs are good for a lot of things. I just don't, like, to me, I don't think everything needs to be done in a GUI. Like, text editing, I don't need to do that in a GUI. There's no demand for me to do that in a GUI. And that's my personal preference. I have extensions and plugins and everything built into Vim that gives me all sorts of peripheral information and whatnot. And, yeah, that's fine. That's all I need. I don't need a GUI for everything. It also saves my battery life, which is very important to me. For some weird reason, I don't like recharging.
Well, speaking of needing things, I didn't have lunch today either.
Well, that's your fault.
Well, I'm gonna go get some food. He may or may not come with me. But ooh, what?
I just realized what time it was. I looked at the little clock.
It's 8 o'clock.
I'm supposed to say that.
Why not?
I don't know. Because it's not.
I'm not saying whether it's morning or not, although I did say lunch. Anyway.
It's been fun. We hope that you guys enjoyed this. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you did, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.